Today we're going to be talking about developing self-regulation in transitional kindergarten students. So just as a preface to talking about self-regulation, I want to note that teachers today cannot simply wait for young children to learn to manage their big emotions. Teachers today actually rate difficulty following directions and other self-regulation issues as the number one concern in teaching. So what we know is that we have to teach these self-regulation strategies and behaviors. Students, we used to be able to, years and years ago, just wait for children to mature. That's what we did. That's what kindergarten was about. But in today's educational arena, we really have to actually teach specific strategies and behaviors to children to help them learn to manage their own self-regulation. So Bedrova and Leong, who are researchers in this area, define self-regulation as a deep internal mechanism that enables children, as well as adults, to engage in mindful, intentional, and thoughtful behaviors. So this isn't something that just comes online one day. One day you're not regulated and the next day you are. It's a deep internal mechanism that is developed over time and with lots and lots of practice. So there are really two major components of self-regulation, and your text talks a little bit about this, possibly in slightly different terms. I just want to go a little bit deeper in this PowerPoint than your text does. And the two components of self-regulation are that children need to control their impulses, and they need to learn to engage in specific behaviors on demand. So when we're talking about controlling impulses, the child has to learn really two things. One is to learn to not do something that they want to do, for instance, grabbing a toy from another child. And they must also learn to stop doing something in which they're engaged. So an example of that might be a child who is climbing on the play structure and is partway up, and the teacher feels that going any higher would be dangerous, and the teacher says it's time to come off the play structure. Part of self-regulation is for a child to learn that they have to stop doing something that they're enjoying doing. So that's all part of controlling impulses, and we certainly know that children with impulse control issues are some of the most difficult in the classroom. So when we talk about engage in behavior on demand, again, we have two parts of that, and that is that a child has to learn to do something that is needed on demand, even if they don't want to. So a parent says, it's time to brush your teeth before bed. Part of self-regulation is learning that the right choice is to get up and do what it is that you've been asked to do. And the second part then is to make choices quickly, again on demand. So in a classroom setting, an example might be to choose an interest center at a designated time. We have all seen children who wander and wander and wander from place to place and have a very difficult time making choices. So making choices quickly is part of what we're talking about when we're talking about self-regulation. So a further example is a child who knows that he should use his words to express his frustration at another child who's taking a long turn on the swing. This particular child must learn to inhibit the impulse to hit or shove the child off the swing. So that's the part of controlling the impulse. And also engage in prior learning by using appropriate language to ask for her turn. So that's the part of engaging in behaviors on demand. So you can see how complicated this is for a 4 or 5-year-old child. It's not something that is taught one day and then the child is able to put it in practice the next day. We have to teach specific behaviors, and we have to teach those behaviors again and again and again. So when we're talking about promoting self-regulation behaviors, there are really 4 strategies. And those 4 strategies include that the teacher has to teach self-regulation to all students, not just those with impulse or focus problems. On occasion, you will see a school district that pulls children out of the classroom who have difficult behaviors and teach just those children. But what we know now from research is that when we teach the whole class, then the whole class becomes self-regulated together, and they remind each other what needs to be done. So even if you have half the class that is very well self-regulated, they still can benefit from learning the self-regulation strategies so that they can help their classmates. Also, once these strategies are taught, the children have to be given the opportunity to practice what it is that you've taught them. So there's lots of ways to do that. I think one of the easiest ways is for transitional kindergarten children is to find books, read the books, which often have scenarios in them, and ask the children, what would you do? And have them be able to think about, okay, here's something that's being presented to me. How would I choose to behave? I'm sorry, I see a typo here. That should say, the third point should say, offer children visual and tangible reminders of those self-regulation strategies. And what I've seen done in classrooms is having actual pictures of children on the walls engaging in specific self-regulation strategies. So you might have a picture of a child raising their hand. And so if the teacher is talking to the class and a child blurts out an answer, the teacher can simply glance at or point to the picture of raising your hand as a reminder that that is a self-regulation behavior. And then the last point is that especially at this age, we have to include play and games as part of the everyday curriculum. So you're going to be teaching these self-regulation strategies as part of something fun for the children to do. Lecturing, as you know, to young children absolutely does not work. So including play and including specific games, even things like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, that helps with focus, which helps with self-regulation. And honestly, if you go on Pinterest or you Google self-regulation games or self-regulation play, you will find lots of strategies for this. I also know that many of the strategies in conscious discipline are geared towards self-regulation for young children. So you would also be able to find lots of ideas on the Conscious Discipline website, and I'm sure on other social emotional learning program websites as well. And finally, there's just 3 points that I want to leave you with, and that is teachers must address the development of self-regulation as the underlying and most important skill that makes learning possible. 4 and 5-year-olds need to be able to focus, stay on task, reduce impulsive behavior, and all of those things make learning possible. When you have children in your classroom who are really struggling with self-regulation, you know it's very hard for them to learn what it is that you need for them to learn. And so for many children, they're not learning these self-regulation behaviors at home, so school becomes the first and only place where they learn about regulating themselves. And finally, and I believe this with all of my heart, instruction in self-regulation, and I would include their social emotional learning in these early years, deserves more attention as the instruction in academic subjects. So we can't have one without the other. If you're going to expect the children to learn academic content, you first have to help them regulate their little minds and bodies to be able to be ready to learn. So I hope that this information is helpful, and we will continue in the class to learn about and share with each other self-regulation strategies that we come across in our own research.